This is the BBC.
This podcast is supported by advertising outside the UK.
Normally, being a little extra might be a bit much, but not when it comes to healthcare. That's why United Healthcare's Health Protector Guard fixed indemnity insurance plans, underwritten by Golden Rule Insurance Company, supplement your primary plan so you manage out-of-pocket costs. Learn more at uh1.com.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the food programme with me, Jaega Wise, where this week I'm exploring the world of rum, from its origins right up to how we drink and make it today. Welcome to our journey through rum.
I love rum. Where there's rum, there's fun, yeah?
If you think of all the cool cocktails, they're all rum-based.
I was really surprised because I thought, rum doesn't come from England, it comes from far away.
Whatever you can do with vodka, you can do with a light rum. Whatever you want to do with whiskey, you can do with a really nice aged rum.
We're going to hear about new ways of making rum.
So in there is 100 litres of our white rum that's been on...
100! Should not have stuck my face in that.
So the blend that we've settled on is a blend from Jamaica, Dominican Republic, and then we've infused it with various fruits and botanicals, some from here from the island.
Rum is just at that pivotal moment at the moment where it's just really kind of having a lot of excitement in the industry.
No one's making rum in Brighton until we came along. That was the bit that I wasn't expecting. I didn't think I could get emotional about a bottle of rum.
And we're going back in time to hear the darker side of rum's history.
There are things that really very few people know. It is shocking to imagine that a certain quantity of alcohol, of rum, would be equated with a human life.
It's part of British history. We're not trying to raise Britain's history that they didn't go out and colonise other parts of the world.
It's quite English, isn't it? If I'm uncomfortable, we won't speak about it. In fact, I don't think I've ever been asked about it until now.
I would say that slavery, the trade of rum and molasses and sugar were all intimately entwined with the Royal Navy in multiple ways.
Well, we think the time has come to face up to the fact that we've got a modern Navy, that we've got an instant response Navy, and that the issue of these fairly substantial quantities of spirit to the fleet is no longer justified.
I want to find out why rum's past matters to us today.
I think it's important for consumers to have a notion of where their favourite rum comes from and what is the history of that rum.
Welcome to the food programme with me, Jaega Wise, where this week we're on a journey looking at the sunny, sociable drink rum is today, and travelling all the way back to its origins in the slave trade. As a drinks maker myself, I've been hearing things in the trade about an intriguing new trend in British rum. So, to start our journey, we travelled down to Sussex to visit one very new producer. Hello.
Hiya.
Hi, nice to meet you. I'm Jaega.
I'm John, nice to meet you.
I'm Georgina, nice
Hi,
to meet
Georgina.
you.
Who's this?
This is Toffee, the distillery dog.
Okay, so this is where we begin. So what's over here?
Here we have a lot of molasses. So we use 4 different sugars in our ferment.
John and Georgina Bowell founded Goldstone Rum just over a year ago, and they're doing things a little different.
So here what we have is this side of the wall is where we carry out all our fermentation, and what you're looking at here, this lovely big piece of copper, is our still. She's relatively large for a craft distillery, it's 500 litres. We had to go big because we're making rum properly through fermentation rather than buying a spirit.
Making rum from scratch in the UK is a relatively new trend. Of course, it's the Caribbean that's famous for its rum, and we'll hear more about that in a few minutes' time. After fermenting the sugars, distilling it and adding water, rum is then usually aged in barrels, just like whiskey. This helps develop its flavour and texture. But as Goldstone are so new into their journey, they're currently using a faster process, using wooden chips from old barrels. This means their rum is ready in 2 to 3 weeks, compared to months or even years when it's made in a more traditional way.
So this is the rapid age.
It's very spicy smelling.
Yeah.
Lots of like vanilla notes as well.
Yeah, so you get the vanillin out of the oaks
Mm-hmm.
come through really quickly, which adds a nice sweetness to it without having to add sugar to the product. So you can see the colour's delightful.
Oh yeah, the colour's brilliant. It's like a dark copper, isn't it?
Yeah.
I won't drink that this early in the morning. Upstairs at the Distillery bar, as I tasted some of Goldstone's award-winning rums, I asked Georgina and John why they'd chosen to make their rum in this way and what made them get into rum in the first place. So your white rum is the most straightforward product that you make?
Yeah.
How long does it take to make?
Well, we do a slow fermentation, so we do a minimum of 14 days.
It is delicious.
Thank you very much.
It's lots of like light raisins. Very, very nice, guys. I'm not surprised this picked up some awards. I suppose the obvious question is why? Of all the spirits that you could have done, why rum?
Rum's fun. Rum is exciting. Rum is just at that pivotal moment at the moment where it's just really kind of having a lot of excitement in the industry. And it's really nice to be a part of that while it's kind of in its infancy and really growing.
For me, it's the fulfilment. I know this sounds ridiculous, but the first bottle that came off the still, it was delicious, and I just burst into tears because it was like, and I might get emotional saying this, 3 weeks ago, that was just sugar and water and yeast. And now it's a really yummy bottle of rum, and we made that. That was the bit that I wasn't expecting. I didn't think I could get emotional about a bottle of rum.
So you've chosen to make your rum from scratch. Why have you made that choice when so many producers in the UK are bringing in rums made in the Caribbean, for example, and blending them or flavouring them here?
My opinion was, if I wanted to brand my product as an English product or a British product, I have to make it here. For me, the most important thing was making the liquid. The benefit of being a scratch producer in the UK is that, and it's a tight community as well, none of us want to replicate a Caribbean rum because that would be insulting. Is it a traditional Caribbean rum? No. Is it a really yummy rum that's easy to drink? Yeah.
What's your welcome been like in the British rum community?
Hit and miss. In all honesty, I think there's varying levels of rum consumers. There's the Friday night, let's go and drink rum and cokes brigade, love it. There's the mass market from a buy local, support British. Think from the more serious rum connoisseur. It feels to me like, I can't substantiate this, but it feels like there's a bit of a stigma of being a British rum producer, that it's not proper rum. So from that side, I guess it's fair to say there's maybe been some resistance to even try it. Although this week we did a rum expo of all British distillers and the feedback was overwhelming.
Making British rum from scratch is far from the only story behind this complex spirit. To find out more, I went to Rumfest in West London, a kind of drink show meets street party, where the spirit of rum is very much on show. This is incredible. There are so many rum producers here. There's a lot of glasses flying about. There is a lot of rum flying about, but also a lot of connoisseurs in the audience. Let's go and have a look round.
Not all rum is just rum. The usual rum that we all start off with is Bacardi, and then when you realise as you go around the different sorts of rum, they're just completely different. There's so many different variants. I was really surprised because I thought, rum doesn't come from England, it comes from far away.
Hi, I'm Chef Hassan Dufour. I love rum. Where there's rum, there's fun, yeah? Caribbean guy, so it's like in my DNA, So right now it's spice rum are ruling, and you're seeing that like there's so much local British rums here this year, which for me is like, wow, you understand? Like the gin is dead, or not dead, but rum is, we're here now,
So I'm Paul from the Distillery Distillery in the Isle of Man. So we start with organic Colombian cane sugar called panela. It's the nearest thing we can get to cane juice. But we like to craft the things ourselves, and the making of it, the fermentations and managing it out, the aromas, that whole sensory experience in the distillery is why we're all so passionate about it.
As a producer who's making a wide variety of different spirits, how have you found the rum market compares with other spirits like gin, for example?
Yeah. I could hand on my heart say it's just extremely good fun, because this is our first rum fest to come to, and the atmosphere, the interaction with the customers, the people that organise it it's electric, and they're really into the spirit. So it's not just coming for a consumer day to have they're having a good time, but they're really fascinated by how we make it, how we do our spiced rum. So I think it's that engagement is amazing at this show, and that seems to be the rum market.
As soon as we came in strong. We've got to go to every single one, trying everything, and some of it is almost like rocket fuel. I think we're connoisseurs. We are. I think it's official. You live an experience, you learn about the rums, their heritage. Some things are fourth generation, some has been in families for many decades. So.
We'll come back to Rumfest later. But first, it was that decades-long history that I wanted to dig into a little deeper. Dr. Christy Pekikero is a military historian specialising in European and Black history at George Mason University in the US. She told me how Caribbean rum first came into being as a byproduct of sugar production. Sugar is made from sugarcane, and when you boil sugarcane, you get sugar, which is the product you're after, and you get a byproduct called molasses. It was in Barbados where they first realised that the molasses left over from this process could be fermented and then distilled into a surprisingly tasty drink.
Alongside the sugar trade, a market for molasses and rum began to flourish in the second half of the 17th century. And molasses and rum became not only commodities, but also a form of currency in the bartering system of trade of the era. And so barrels of rum were part of the cargo on these massive ships sailing across the Atlantic, and quantities of rum were traded for other commodities. And certainly if we're talking about what was referred to as the African slave coast or Gold Coast, humans were traded for barrels of rum. And so practically speaking, there were calculations for how many barrels of rum a human being put into slavery would be worth.
So sugar quickly took off as a fast-growing and lucrative cash crop. And to keep up with demand, planters quickly realised they needed labour, and lots of it.
Initially, it's important to note that planters in the British colonies, beginning in Barbados, actually used indentured servants to provide their labor before they used enslaved labor. Many of these servants in the British colonies came from Ireland, from Scotland, from Cornwall and Devon. As sugar began to take off as a commodity, the labor provided by indentured servants was not sufficient. And that is when the British started to get much more involved in the slave trade. Britain was the most dominant in the slave trade between 1640 and 1807, and it is estimated that Britain transported 3.1 million Africans to the British colonies in the Caribbean, North and South America, and to other countries. Slavery and sugar were quintessential aspects, the drivers of sea power and the Atlantic maritime world for centuries.
Dr. Christy Pekikero, who we'll hear more from later. I was starting to piece together how rum is so intricately connected with Britain's history in the Caribbean and Britain's role in the slave trade. And this wasn't just something happening in the Caribbean colonies. Places like Brazil and India are also world-renowned rum makers, and their rum industries were built on the back of the sugar industry, indentured and slave labour. With ships going back and forth across the Atlantic, you can see how a great network was established between these places trading goods, rum and people. Back at Rumfest, among the rum drinkers and the producers, I met someone who knows more than most about rum, from its origins to the UK rum scene today. Here's Ian Burrell, the global rum ambassador and the founder of Rumfest.
the rum explosion in the UK is in the last probably, I'd say 2.5 years has grown phenomenally. So a lot of distilleries are making rum from scratch. They bring in molasses, which you have to make rum from, or anything, a byproduct of sugarcane. They add some water, yeast, ferment that and distill that and make local rums or English rums. And then there's a lot of spiced rums. These are rums that have been spiced and flavored. And what they're doing is either making that from scratch, or an easier process is buy good quality rum, add your own spices to it, blend it and bottle it, put your label on it, bam, you've got a rum brand. And we're seeing a lot more of that in the UK.
Are there differences in how those two producers are viewed?
Good question. So when we see British rum companies buying rums, Caribbean rums essentially, and blending or putting spices in there, they are doing a tried and tested formula. This is traditional, to buy rums from a distillery, put your name in it on your spin and do what you're doing. For me, it's about the taste. Does it taste good? Because just because you make your rum from scratch, it doesn't mean it's going to be good. Just because you buy from the Caribbean, it doesn't mean it's going to be good.
You as a rum expert, do you care?
Yeah, I mean, me, it's a great way, it's a great conversation piece. So I give them a lot of respect and I do admire them, but I don't see them as more superior than, say, someone who's bought rum from, let's say someone bought rum from Foursquare in Barbados. Foursquare has won the title as the best rum maker for the last 8 years in the world. And no one can argue against that, even me as a Jamaican. Oh!
What about some of the history of rum? Could you tell me where rum comes from?
Rum was built on the back of enslaved Africans. They were brought over, kidnapped, taken from Africa to the Caribbean to be used to make rums. And the companies were built up on that. So rum can never ever get away from that. We should never forget that. And that's one of the reasons why culturally rum is important to African and Caribbean cultures. It's an important part of the story to tell. More importantly, the economy that it brings back to the Caribbean is so important. I used to work with a Jamaica rum company, and I was made the first brand ambassador here in the UK back in the late 90s. And the pride I had as a Jamaican, I knew that every time I sold a bottle of Jamaican rum inside a bar or a restaurant, I knew some of that money was going back to Jamaica.
To understand a bit more about how rum became so significant, we need to go back in time again. Namely the 17th century, when the British Navy first replaced beer with rum as the daily ration given out to sailors. This was when the British Navy ships started having a greater presence in the Caribbean. Later on, they were charged with protecting British interests in the region when rum started to be taxed. Christy Pekikero picks up the story.
And so a half pint of rum was originally issued neat, and then sailors would prove it if they lit it with fire and gunpowder to see if it would burn properly, to verify that it was at least 57% proof. And eventually it was split into 2 servings a day, one at 10 a.m., between 10 a.m. and noon, and the second one between 4 and 6 in the afternoon.
Well, we think the time has come to face up to the fact that we've got a modern Navy and that the issue of these fairly substantial quantities of spirit to the fleet is no longer justified.
Naval discipline is built on tradition. Don't you think you're striking at one of the cornerstones of naval tradition?
Well, there are traditions and traditions, you know. Some are super traditions and we must keep them at all costs. Others have their time and they pass on. I mean, we had a tradition of corporal punishment and sale and things change. Now, rum, 170 years ago, was really an anodyne for sailors for the appalling conditions they lived in. This is not a very fine tradition. I think it was a good thing in its day, but that day has passed. I think tradition, there are traditions and traditions. This is one I think we can skip.
That was a clip from 1969 we found in the BBC archive, the year before the Navy rum ration was officially ended, on the day that became known as the Black Tot. But the ration wasn't the only way the Navy was linked to the rum trade. Here's Christy Pekikero.
And so rum made its way into the British Navy at that time as a part of their rations, also as a product in which they were involved for trade. So when we think of the successes and the prestige of the Royal Navy during this entire period, it's important to equate those things with the slave trade and with the rise of global capitalism. And while the West Africa Squadron of the Royal Navy that helped to suppress slavery in the 19th century receives a lot of praise and attention, the Royal Navy's role in the slave trade receives much less attention. I would say that slavery, the trade of rum and molasses and sugar were all intimately entwined with the Royal Navy in multiple ways.
What we found out while making this programme is that the history of rum isn't something that people necessarily know or want to talk about. Here's Xavier Baker, co-founder of the Isle of Wight Distillery and a recent BBC Food and Farming Award winner. He's one of those distilleries Ian Burrell was talking about, following the tradition of buying your rum in before blending it yourself.
The blend that we've settled on is a blend from Jamaica, Dominican Republic, and then we've infused it with various fruits and botanicals, some from here from the island. So cherries, apricots, some holy grass, some black salt, some vanilla. We're really happy with the final recipe. So hopefully you'll find a nice smooth rum.
It smells glorious.
Cherry, apricots, and of course rock samphire.
Oh, it smells so good. Oh, it's like being in the Caribbean. Xavier also makes rum in partnership with the National Museum for the Royal Navy in Portsmouth. At 57% strength, it's as close as they can get to the original Navy rum. And as such, it has a tangible link with the past.
Officers back in the day on board ship prided themselves on being rum experts. So they would go around to the various islands selecting the rums. And so the true, as far as we can see from the archives, a Navy rum is a blend from Trinidad, Guyana and Jamaica. So we've selected rums, pulled that together to try and replicate as close as we can a true Navy rum. We've then got an oak stave from HMS Victory in the barrel as well, just to add a bit of authenticity and a bit of a nice touch. So this is HMS Victory Navy strength rum, 57%, gunpowder proof. Cheers.
Cheers. Oh, that goes down easy, doesn't it, for the strength? Rum obviously has a very long and complex history, lots of it entwined with the trade of enslaved people. How would you say producers are engaging with that history?
It's a good point, and I was aware of it. I haven't really acknowledged in sort of what we've done. But as you mentioned, that's something we should probably be more mindful of, and how we sort of try and bring that into the mix of how rum is something that people are so interested in, it's gaining popularity, something that needs to be acknowledged more, definitely.
Back at Goldstone Rum Distillery, I asked Georgina and John the same question. How, if at all, do they engage with rum's past?
Being brutally honest, I'm not entirely sure how to answer that question because I've never been asked before. As an English producer who historically we have a majority of that horrible period of time to answer for, comes with some challenges.
It's been a really interesting journey in the making of this programme in, like, your response has mirrored the response of a lot of British makers we've spoken to. There's an awkwardness about the conversation. It doesn't particularly feel like intentional or anything like that. It just feels awkward, where people don't really know what to say.
I think it is uncomfortable to talk about, and I think then maybe I am part of the problem as well, that until we get comfortable talking about it, we're never going to progress.
Clearly, this is quite a difficult thing to get your head around. Why does the rum of today have anything to do with the atrocities of the slave trade? And what should we do with that information? Back at Rumfest, I asked Ian Burrell.
It's part of British history. We're not trying to erase Britain's history that they didn't go out and colonise other parts of the world. Took the resources from there, brought them back to Britain, and made Britain wealthy. Yes, it happened. But what we have to do is not fight with the old, we need to build upon the new. And that was Confucius said that. And that's what we need to, once we learn to do that, then it becomes easy talking about enslaved Africans and Britain's past, because Britain should never deny what they did and how they are. But we should also then say, as Brits, black, white, yellow, green, British people, we need to work together to be a better country and work together to move forward so things like that never happen again.
How aware do you think the British public are of the history between rum and slavery?
Some people just want to drink a rum and have fun and enjoy themselves. They don't want to know about the past or the history or how that particular rum or that brand got to where it is. In answer to your question, I think a very, very small percentage of the UK public know much about what's called rum's past as such, but it's growing. It's not only just for us as black British people, it is also for white British people as well to learn about the culture of Black Britain. So Rumfest was an important part of that because, as I always say, rum has been built on the back of enslaved Africans, and that is a part of the history that we need to talk more about because Britain has become very wealthy on rum.
I asked Christy Pikikero how she thinks rum's past could shape how we drink or make it today.
I think that now in 2023, following the resurgence of the Black Lives Matter movement, I think that it's time that the rum industry, as many other sectors of society have done, begin to acknowledge and honor this history. This is a part of the story of rum, and it's one that is unavoidable. It's a story that merits to be told. Rum itself is also a type of family heirloom for people who were not just the producers of sugar and the plantation owners, but also for the individuals who labored in the fields, who labored in the mills and the distilleries, that this is also a proud part of our history and heritage that today's producers of rum could acknowledge and tell more about.
I understand that you visited a few rum distilleries in the Caribbean. What's it like knowing what you know, knowing the history? How does that make you feel?
When I visited my first rum distillery in the French colony of Guadeloupe, I was struck by the scent, that thick, sugary, dark scent of the molasses that's being distilled. And to think that these were the fragrances that enslaved people were also surrounded by. And so it is deeply bittersweet to think about the extraordinary horrors and pain of my own ancestors in these exact spots, but then also to know that I myself here in 2023 enjoy freedom and enjoy this historical and indeed delicious spirit in freedom.
So we've come to the end of our dark and stormy journey through rum, but back at Rumfest, there was just time for one more important stop-off. A cocktail class from the rum ambassador himself.
So the cocktail we're going to make is something very, very simple. It's a daiquiri with a little twist. We're going to do a peach with a little bit of mint inside there. And it's just using a rum trinity of rum, lime and sugar. Then we're going to add some ice. Put that into our shaker. And we turn it upside down and we give it a good shake. Give it a little tap just to open it up. Oh, that's nice and dry. Ooh, nice. That's what I like. And then pour it into a nice coupe. Perfect. And there we go. We have a beautiful, fresh Angostura daiquiri with lashings of lemon notes, peach flavour. And a bit spank, a little bit of mint on top. Get a mint leaf, give that a spank. And then put it on top as a garnish. Just to give it that mojito feel. And there you have it. Nicely easy, simple daiquiri. For good times. And cheers. Don't forget the eyes. And yeah. Oh, that was it.
Oh, that's nice. That's lovely.
Oh.
Thanks for listening. The food programme was presented by me, Jaega Wise, and produced by Nina Pullman for BBC Audio in Bristol.